Hi everyone, I'm military genealogist Simon Pearce, and welcome to May's Facebook Live Q&A over on the Forces War Records Facebook page. My word, it's a hot one. It's a warm one, but it's a perfect time to sit down in a cool, quiet place and do some military family history and dig into our family trees. If this is the first time that you've joined us on one of these sessions, then thank you so much for taking the time to join us. And if you've submitted a question, then hopefully we'll get time to look at it in today's session. If you're one of our regulars who tunes in, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And if you're watching us live afterwards, because I know not everyone can watch us live during the session, well, thank you for taking the time to come back and watch us. These videos stay on our Facebook page for about a month. I think it's about 30 days after the session, and they'll go up straight away onto our Facebook page. And I can see people starting to arrive in the session here. So thank you so much. If you're joining us, feel free to say hi if you're joining us today. And just by way of introduction, my name is Simon Pearce. I'm a military genealogist for Ancestry and Forces War Records. I work across both sites. I've been with Ancestry for over 10 years now. I specialize in military research, and there is nothing I love more than helping you research your military family members. We do this every month since October 2022. We've not missed a single monthly Q&A. 1 hour, the last Thursday of every month. We take your questions and we try and break down those tricky research brick walls. Now, by way of admin, I'm just going to do a little bit of an introduction before I get stuck into the questions. And I'm going to copy something into the comments. You may notice in the comments a pinned comment already with some links. I'm going to put in another one now, my checklist for today. I've dropped in some links on how to order service records from the National Archives, how to order service records from the Ministry of Defence, and then my checklist for May for all the different records that we're going to talk about today in the session. So if you're watching live or if you're watching back afterwards, if I mention a particular guide or a particular record, you can find the handy link in the comments. And you'll notice that we go between Ancestry and Forces War Records because although we're going to look largely at a lot of Forces War Records collections, you do often have to look in more than one place for family history. Sometimes you have to go on to Ancestry, to the National Archives. They're all different pieces of the puzzle. I'm going to go through some of the pre-submitted questions that you very kindly sent in over the last week. We always put some posts out in the week leading up to the Q&A where you can drop in your questions, but feel free to ask some live questions. I'll try and get around to them during the session if I can. If I can't, hopefully I'll get around to them maybe next month, or there's always next month, or the questions I answer might be relevant to you. Hi, Victoria, one of our regulars. Thank you so much for your comments and for joining us. So nice of you to give up your time, especially on such a hot day. My word, is it hot. I hope everyone's keeping cool wherever you are, and yeah, you're getting through it okay. Right, that's enough of introductions and housekeeping. I think we should get stuck into the first question. And if you're new to the Q&A, what we tend to do is we'll go through different records. I'll give you some examples. We'll dive into them together so we can look together and get a feel for the records. And everyone's welcome, whether you're a complete beginner or a pro, everyone's welcome. And if you have another question after the Q&A or in a few months' time, you're always welcome to come back. But let's get stuck into the first question, shall we? Here's one from Glenn. Hi, Simon. I have an uncle that, based on age, likely served in the Second World War, but I can't find any record for him. And I bet there's some of you at home watching this that have a similar experience to Glenn. I have his death certificate, but haven't been able to find any service number. And frankly, there's no one left in the family that can help. He's challenging to look up because he has the same name as his father and his grandfather. Well, that does make it a challenge. What's helpful here, Glenn, is that you've provided his full name, his date of birth, and where he was born. So that's going to help me here. So for anyone watching at home, let's do a step by step. What would I do if I was researching this person day to day doing my research? Well, you can search the entire Forces War Records site. Let me call this tab up so you can see. So you could search the entire Forces War Records site, Glenn, for George Haslam. But if we do that, George Haslam, you'll see we get a huge number of results. And I'm sure there are people, well, 54, but sometimes you can get thousands if you have quite a popular name. Now, you can do that, but that can be quite tricky. When I'm researching the Second World War and I literally don't know who they served with, I'll sometimes target the Second World War British Army medal cards, and you'll find the link to these in the comments. These detail the medal applications made by soldiers or their next of kin after the war. Let's have a look here. I'll just search for Haslam to give you an example. The reason I mentioned this collection, and let's just go for Douglas at the first one here, If you don't have any idea at all who your ancestors served with, your family members served with, but you think, oh, they may have served with the British Army, these cards often detail their address. Can you see here in the middle? Their rank, their number. So you may not know this information, but you may search by name, find the card, recognize the address, and there you are, you've made the match. And you have these clues that jump out, their signature, which is a lovely thing to see, but also the medals in the bottom right. So that's what I would be doing as well. If you have no idea who they serve with, I'll be hitting next the medal card. So that would be my next step. Okay, but what would I do then after that? Well, one of my tips here, if I don't know anything about the person, I always search, and this will make sense in a moment. If you're researching a military family member and you think, okay, they could have married or had children during the war or during their service, and here, look at their birth records, baptism records, marriage records. So here's one from my great uncle Howard. Really amazing man. I was very lucky to know him and just hear all about his service in the Second World War. But this is his baptism record in 1918. And his father, my great grandfather, was a soldier. Now, the baptism record just says soldier, but it's a clue to the branch he served with. And sometimes they contain extra information. The marriage record, if we go back to 1918, just before the birth, when my great grandparents married, if I zoom in for you here, I can see here in the occupation section that my great grandfather is recorded as a private with the 1st Ox and Bucks Light Infantry. I've even seen cases where the army number is recorded. So always look for birth, marriage, baptism records in that instance. But I appreciate, Glenn, in your circumstances, your grandfather, your father, apologize, I can't remember now. Either way, your grandfather or father, your grandfather, your father rather, he may have been too young, but it's always worth doing. Now, second step, 1939 register. This was taken 1 month into the beginning of the Second World War. Available on Ancestry, and it documents the entire civilian population. And the details were used to create ID cards in 1914 to help with rationing, but it doesn't include the military. There are some, but basically it generally doesn't include the military. So you've given me his name and his date of birth of 1921. That's important because the 1939 register provides a date of birth. What we want to do is we want to see here, and here he is here. We want to see, basically, if he appears here, he hadn't been called up yet. So this is a really good indicator he hadn't been called up, and we can see him, although handwriting's a little bit trickier here on this one. Sometimes it depends on the person filling it out, but we can see here George W. Haslam. We can link him by his date of birth. Compositor apprentice, I think that is, possibly. Either way, we know on the outbreak of war, 1 month into it, he hadn't been called up. Okay, so what's my next step? What do I do in this instance? I would then search newspapers. Now, if anyone is researching their military family members or just doing family history in general, I tell you what, newspapers are incredible. They often detail stories about military family members, sometimes with photos, sometimes they publish their letters, maybe articles if they were killed in action or if they were wounded. And remember, Glenn, and anyone watching, search with the full name like I've done up here. So I'm on newspapers.com at the moment, which is also part of the Ancestry family, just like Forces War Records. I always search in speech marks to keep the names together. That's a little tip from me. Do that. That's really helpful. Sometimes I like to search with just the initial, George W. or GW. But in this instance, I've searched for George William Haslam and Glenn. I dropped down to here and I saw this. A wedding extract or a wedding article. Miss Elsie Robinson of Cinder Lane, Orrell, Liverpool, and aircraftman George William Haslam of Inigo Road, Orrell, Liverpool, leaving the Church of St. John St. James after their wedding. So we have the address here, Inigo Road. If we go back to the 1939 register, if we look up here in the top left, the address, that's him there. So we've made a connection now to the address. So it looks like he was an aircraftman. So that's the lowest rank of the RAF. That was introduced in 1919 and replaced air mechanics. He was in the RAF. So now we know from the different pieces of the puzzle and digging a little bit deeper, we know he was in the RAF. So what's your next step here, Glenn? What I would do from now is order his service record from the Ministry of Defence. There's a link in the comments on how to do that. You don't need lots of information. You just need name, date of birth, I think sometimes place of birth, and they will want proof of death. So a death certificate or an official obituary from a paper. Now, the other thing I did do is just run his name through a very important collection on Forces War Records, the UK Royal Air Force nominal index. I can see here that there's a George William Haslam. They're saying joined up after 1941. Militia was the word they used for those that were conscripted, and a service number. Now, I'm not saying that's 100% him, because we have to appreciate, although it's a fairly unique name, there may have been others with that name, but this could be his number. So when you apply for a service record from the MOD, Glenn, you can leave it blank, the service number, or you could put, possibly 541 500, but you don't necessarily need it. But here's just an indicator. So it looks like from those steps here and the different pieces of the puzzle, we've worked out who he served with, which branch, and now it's up to you to order the service record. And once you have that service record, Glenn, it will indicate the different stations that he was posted to. You'll be able to track his movements that way. And then the National Archives, you'll be able to find different logs and books to track those stations in more detail. But good luck. I mean, that was a brilliant question to kick us off. So thank you so much for that, Glenn. That was a brilliant one. Okay, we're going to jump back into the First World War now. And here's an interesting question from Jane. And I'm going to call up the image while I read out the question. Would this Iron Cross why would this Iron Cross be in the possession of my mother-in-law's father? His name was Archie Claude Bowden from Bideford, and he served with the Devons or the Berkshire Regiment. There's no name on the cross, so can they be traced? So this is a German Iron Cross from the First World War. We have the W in the middle for the German ruler at the time, Kaiser Wilhelm, and then it's very, very hard to see, but in the bottom cross there's a 1914, so that indicates it's the First World War. They are very hard. I don't think they are inscribed on the back. I've never seen one in person, but I don't think they're engraved on the back with a name or number or unit details. I've read that the clasp here, the circle kind of clasp where the ribbon would go through, was sometimes stamped with the maker's stamp, so you can pin down where it was made, but there's no real way. And so how did he become in possession? Probably a souvenir, as Victoria very rightly pointed out in the comments earlier. Could have been traded for something during the war. He could have taken it off some, who knows? He could have found it. He could have taken it off someone, the body of someone or a prisoner. We just don't know. We're speculating. But he's come across it somehow during the First World War. There were different classes. There was the first and second class. I believe the second class was, I have to look at my notes again, because I've never actually had the privilege of researching these, but I believe the second class, the first class was pinned to the uniform with a pin. The second class had a ribbon that went through the loop and then was tucked underneath the second tunic button. So it looks like he's come across it during his service. Now, when I searched for your mother-in-law's father, Jane, I just searched by his name alone. There's a number of records here. I can see he appears in the Western Front Association pension ledgers. Now, for anyone watching who's researching a First World War family member, I would definitely have a look at these. Now, for the First and Second World War, and for many other areas of military research, I've dropped some guides in the comments. So if you are struggling or you're not entirely sure where to look for your research, have a look at my guides in the comments. My guide to First World War research, guide for Second World War research. There's some hints and tips there on how to get started, where to look. Hopefully that will help some of you fill in the gaps. But Jane, by just searching by name, and going back to this pension ledgers, these are very good, particularly if your family member's service record was destroyed. They will really help you to fill in the gaps and give you some useful clues. There's some details here. This indicates that he was pensioned. A medal card with some useful clues as well. So that will be what I would be doing, having a look at the service, these documents, and then look at the medal, the war diaries. We have the war diaries on Forces War Records. These will give you a day-to-day account of what his unit was doing. You may be able to look at some of the action that he was experiencing and where they were serving. So that's worth doing. There's lots there to get stuck into. And thank you, Jane. That was a really interesting one there to get stuck into. Okay, sticking with the First World War. This is John's question, and I'm going to call up a video next. John, you have asked, I have a First World War medal, military medal, awarded to A.W. Wareham of the 7th Battalion Royal West Kents. I'm trying to find the London Gazette entry for a date and the action, but I've hit a brick wall. I've tried the war diary, but I need a date. Can you help me? Okay, so I've called up a video on screen. I'm going to post this in the comments for anyone researching the MM. Let me just drop that one. Now, anyone researching the MM? Right, this video here outlines a little bit more about the military medal, a gallantry award issued by the British Army, or two members of the British Army from 1960. It was, let me start again. Brought in 1916, but it was backdated for the First World War. It was largely for those serving with the British Army, but it could be awarded to some personnel of the Navy and the Air Force. But basically, it was for gallantry in the face of the enemy generally. And over 115,000 were issued in the First World War. And we have another question on the MM by Phil later on. But Phil, the answers I'm going to give here are going to be very relevant for you, but we'll also dive into yours later as well. I created a video on how to research them. The MM is very, very difficult to research, as I'm sure John and Phil have found. The citations often haven't survived to the description of why they were awarded. Most of the time when we look in the London Gazette, which for anyone who's not familiar, is the official publication of the British government, you can still find it online. The London Gazette contains references to officers' promotions, to gallantry awards, for gallantry awards to officers and other ranks and non-officers. Very, very helpful. But the problem is, and we'll look in a moment, when you look in the London Gazette, and it sounds like, John, you've done the same, but for the benefit of those watching at home, when you look in the London Gazette here, we can see that the name just appears on a list. It very, very rarely here in the London Gazette gives you a citation or a description. So here's a little hint. I found, for anyone watching, when you search the London Gazette, you find your person by searching by name and number, and you get given this little page here. If we delete this part here, we can open up the whole thing and we'll look together, because here's a little tip for anyone navigating this section. So we want to find Wareham. Let me just jump in here. So let's find Wareham, shall we? Let's get rid of that as well. So when we find our man, we can see him here. So here is, let me zoom in because that's quite far out. But basically, I mentioned over 115,000 were issued in for the First World War. As we scroll up, you get a sense of just how many of these incredible acts of bravery were awarded the MM. So, and look, some of them even say Salonika. So some of them have a theatre, a location, but not in the case of John's person that he's researching. But the reason we scroll is because we eventually want to get to a section like, any moment, I remember I noted what page it was on. Are we going to get there? Not going to make you watch me scroll too long. Or will I? Okay, bear with me. It's coming up. It's coming up. The page is coming that we want. But this emphasizes how many were issued. How many were issued? And this is just one page alone from 1919, I believe. Where are you? I noted the page number. It's coming up. It's on the left-hand side. I remember looking at it earlier. Here we go. Apologies. Right. The reason we scroll like that is so we get to a section like this. His Majesty the King has been graciously pleased to approve of the award of the Military Medal for bravery in the field to the undermentioned warrant officers, non-commissioned officers, and men. John, as you probably noticed, and Phil, a little bit later with your research, this is generally the only reference we're going to find. It's very, very rare that we're going to get any more than this in the London Gazette. So, and it doesn't indicate when the medal was awarded. Now, I always say, look at the war diaries. That's not the image I'm looking for. Where's the war diary? Here we are. Okay, here's an example from a war diary. I'm just going to zoom out for everyone at home. The war diaries, as we've touched on already, but I'm sure some of you have seen already, this is just an example for the 10th Battalion Royal Welsh Fusiliers. At the end of each month, quite often, not always, but quite often, the honours and awards for the battalion were listed. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that the event happened in that month. It's usually when it appeared in the London Gazette. So we can see here, the undermentioned, let me zoom in for everyone at home because it's a little bit zoomed out. The undermentioned are awarded the Military Medal for bravery in the field, appearing in the London Gazette on the 19th of February, 1917. So this, and it has the names of the men here, but this is, this entry here could be the February 1917 month. I haven't got the other pages, but basically it doesn't say when the event happened. And that's the challenge with the military medal. It's very rare. It's very hard to pin down what happened. So our best bet, and if you haven't done this, John, or Phil as well, newspapers. And I touch on that in the video that I pasted into the comments earlier. Local papers are very, very good at researching military family members, but they would sometimes reference those awarded medals. So we can see here from the Evening Post, I think this is a Nottinghamshire newspaper, just an example here. You even sometimes see articles with photos. So we can see here that news has been received that Gunner Bert Fuller, Royal Field Artillery, son of Mr. and Mrs. Arthur Fuller of Marshfield, Gloucestershire. So we're getting this amazing biographical details. And if that's Gloucestershire, this can't be the Nottingham. This must be Bristol. Anyway, that's beside the point. For gallantry in attending the wounded under heavy shell fire. He joined up at the end of August 1914. So we're getting a little bit of extra information here from this biography. So, John, you may not find the person you're researching in the newspapers, but that is going to be your best bet of finding something. And you can see here some other amazing entries here. Some of these are the soldiers that were killed, some that were perhaps wounded or captured. But when you find a photo like this, it's so special. I mean, there's clues already. We can see the bandolier over this soldier's shoulder. It shows that he's a mounted or a mounted soldier with a bandolier on there. There's little clues that we can pick out. But yeah, very special. So that's going to be tough, John. But hopefully, just hopefully, these are some clues that will help you along the way with your research. Okay, let's go to number 4. I think that's everything on my list that I was going to run by with this one here. Yes, okay. So here's one from Annie. My father was shot down during the Second World War. I know his name, but I need to find out if he was 5 foot tall. So you point out that his nickname was Titch when he was in the RAF, and he was 5 foot tall. So how would you prove that? Well, his service record, available from the Ministry of Defence. So Annie, if you're watching, use the link in the comments to order his service record from the MOD. They provide a physical description, eye colour, hair colour, complexion, weight, if they had any tattoos, etc., physical marks, and it should provide his height there. You mentioned that he's shot down, so what you'll want to do there is, well, you can search Forces War Records by name. I've searched for his name, George Merrill, but there's a number of them coming up in this index of airmen that we use at the very beginning for Glenn's question. So that's going to be tricky to pin down here based on this alone, but you can apply to the Ministry of Defence based on just date of birth, death certificate, name, place of birth. That's all you need really, so that should help. But what do we do as we start digging deeper? What do you find? So when you have his service record, you want to find out when he was shot down. Well, his service record will tell you the squadrons he served with. And for anyone researching the RAF, you'll find in the comments not only my guide to researching RAF family members, but you'll find a link to this collection. I'm just going to have a glass of water because that is warm. It's very warm. The operations record books. Okay, these operations record books, and I know if you're a regular, you hear me talk about these all the time. These are I reckon they're in my top 3 favourite military records, just because they're just so valuable. They are just so interesting. If you're researching someone that served with the RAF and you know their squadron, and Annie, when you get your father's service record, you'll be able to find out the squadrons he served with. Look up the RAF record book. So this is for number 276. I think if I remember off the top of my head, 276, were they a sea patrol? They were a sea rescue, an air sea rescue squadron. That was it. So rescuing downed airmen from the sea. So what incredible work. And you can see here that you have the different days for the operation, the aircraft that went up, the crew, PO. So the sergeant, pilot officer, flight sergeant, etc. The duty, so what they were doing, and the time they went up, the time they went down, and then the comments. So Annie, if you know the date from the service record of when your father was shot down, have a look in the operations record book at the day, and you'll be able to find some amazing information. So yeah, really, that's really interesting. And you also mentioned that your mother served with the Auxiliary Territorial Service. So I would order her service record from the National Archives. You can use the link that's in the comments. Order her service record from the National Archives. I had a little search. It hasn't been indexed yet, but that doesn't mean they don't have it. And you can apply with just name, date of birth, and that should, place of birth and proof of death, and that should be enough. You mentioned that your parents married during the war while they were serving. as pointed out with Glenn, I would order their marriage record from the General Register Office because it will then provide a reference to their occupations, and it might just give you a little clue, a number or something to latch onto to help you with your research. But that's a brilliant question. Really, really good question. We're touching on some really valuable strategies here for military family research, and that's a really, really good one there. Okay, the next one is Michael. And another video, because we often create videos on Forces War Records on how to do research. I'm going to drop this video into the comments. If you are researching a Second World War family member, service and casualty form video. Have I spelled that wrong? Oh, well, there we go. Okay. The service and casualty form, that's going to be very relevant in one moment for the question. And you can see here I've created a video on how to use it. Might be playing on your screen at the moment. Basically, I talk you through this very, very valuable page. But what is the service and casualty form? We'll get into that in one moment. Michael says, my dad served in India during and after the Second World War. We have his military records, but it's difficult to work out which regiment to contact for more information. Starting in the Scottish Queen's Regiment, then the King's Regiment in Liverpool for transportation, and then Indian Army assigned to British reinforcements, training, Central India. So basically, he jumps around different units. Now, the one thing I'd say, first of all, Michael, for anyone watching, regimental museums are fantastic. I used to volunteer in one when I first started out. University, I was volunteering at one. I learned so much. They often have records in their archives. But in this instance, I don't think they're going to have the records we're looking for at the moment, but I'll get onto that in one moment. But they are always worth contacting, and it's always important to support, our local regimental museums because they're such interesting places and keepers of amazing history. But what you want to do, you have his service record, Michael. So for Michael and anyone watching, if you are researching a British Army Second World War service person, their service record is going to hold the clues. Now, you may see that I'm looking at this on Ancestry. Ancestry is in the process of digitising the Second World War British Army service records, but also those that served from 1921 onwards. Now, some are online, some are still being digitised, and they've been broken down into 3 sections. This general section for 1939 to 59, the Royal Electrical Mechanical Engineers, and then another section for smaller units, which is Army Pay Corps, musicians, Veterinary Corps, and you'll find all the links in the comments. It's always worth searching on Ancestry first to see if your family member's record has been digitised. If it hasn't, you'll then need to go to the National Archives. But if they were an officer of the British Army, it will be with the Ministry of Defence. But the point I'm trying to make here, and I appreciate I've waffled on a little bit, but basically the service and casualty form is really valuable. If we go over to the next page, Michael, anyone watching, this will contain the movements of your family member. So we can see here, this soldier posted to the 14th Holding Battalion in Tunbridge, where some of my family tree is. I was doing some research on that just last week, actually. That's a funny coincidence. Okay, place and then rank and date. This is going to help you piece together their movements. We can see here posted to the British Expeditionary Force, 16th of April 1947, the lead up to Dunkirk. Left for France, 17th of April. So we are talking a month or so before. Posted to number 2 IBD Infantry Brigade Depot, I believe, evacuated to the UK. Wow, so we can see here during the Dunkirk evacuations. So we're seeing this, or maybe that's just, just after Dunkirk, the last evacuation. The point I'm trying to make is this is the page that is going to help you piece together their movements. Now, once you see the different units they were with, because it doesn't just reference their units or regiments, it references if they were on leave, punished, if they were wounded in hospital. You want to have a look at these different units, Michael, and then get hold of the war diaries. Now, most of the war diaries are with the National Archives, and there's this guide here. If you just Google World War II war diaries and look at the National Archives page, they're all broken down here. And if you're looking at home, you have these different sections of the British Expeditionary Force. So this section here will be useful for the Dunkirk bit that I was just talking about. But then you have sections for the Middle East, for West Africa, for Northwest Europe, which will be for D-Day onwards, and you can search for the war diaries here. Basically, I would search for war diaries for the different units that you can see him serving with, Michael. Now, some have been digitized by Ancestry, Ancestry has the war diaries for the Second Battle of Al Alamein in 1942. It has them for the invasion of Sicily from July 1943 and for D-Day in 1944. So a small section, but some really good ones. Just to give you an example, oh, actually, this was a map I found this morning that I thought I'd share with everyone. This is for, I think this is in Bardia, so the Western Desert, the fighting. I think it's 1941, this map. But basically, it's really interesting. I mean, the kind of things you find in war diaries. And when you know that this is the unit that your ancestors served with, you start to look through that. I mean, I could look at these maps. They are so important for military family history, but I could look at these for ages. They're just so interesting. But basically, the war diaries will give you a day-to-day account of what they were doing. So here we go. Let me just jump to the first page. These maps that we see, that we just looked at, they tend to be at the end of each month. So here's the title page, if you like, for the month, March 1942, 44th Royal Tank Regiment, Mediterranean Expeditionary Force, or Middle East Force, and the day. So the locations, that'll be a map reference, the date, and what was going on. So basically, Michael, you're going to want to do this for the units that your father served with and piece together his movements that way. And anyone researching a Second World War family member, it is really worth getting hold of these war diaries. And I explained how to do it in detail in the World War II research guide, and you'll find that in the comments. And hopefully that will help. But yeah, always special to be able to look at World War II war diaries, or any war diary really. Okay, great question, Michael. Thank you for that. Okay, here's one from Claire. My brick wall is Arthur Harry Arnold, born in 1896 in Northampton. He said he was a conscientious objector when he was called up for service. He lost his appeal in 1916, and that's the last record I have of him, until a newspaper report in 1930, by which time he's changed his name. Are there lists of deserters? Okay, so that's quite tricky. So it looks like Claire's researching someone who was a conscientious objector, and those are those that in 1916, when conscription was introduced, so compulsory military service, they were against serving. Well, no, that's not necessarily true, actually. They were against bearing arms. And I'll get on to that in a moment. But basically, many of these conscientious objectors didn't agree with the war, didn't agree with fighting a fellow human, and refused to be called up for active service. And you can actually find at the National Archives and a lot of local archives tribunal papers regarding their hearings, and they sometimes made the papers. His case was thrown out, so it looks like he was called up in 1916. So you then have the challenge, Claire, of researching a military family member. And I would use the First World War research guide that I have listed in the comments. Now, you've asked, are there any records of deserters? Yes, there are. You mentioned that you thought he could be a deserter because you haven't been able to find him, and he changed his name. That's possible. I mean, appreciate at the moment we're speculating. Did he change his name because of the circumstances around being a conscientious objector? I don't know. We're speculating. But if you do want to go down the route of looking at the deserters records, we do have two collections on ForcesWarRecords. There's UK Police Gazette deserters, which is a very thorough index, and we also have some images in this collection as well. So let's just search this one here. Let's just search for Thomas. Let's just type a name in. I mean, this one covers 1812 to 1927, so we might not necessarily get First World War straight away. But let me give you an example. Okay, let me just pull this one up. But basically, the police gazettes were issued by the police to look for criminals, and that included those that are deserted from the military. And here we can see, and this is from 1899, but the name, the number, the corps, physical description, and the date of enlistment, packed with information, marks and remarks, tattoos, all sorts there, really interesting. Basically a way of helping to pin them down. So try and find that for the First World War if you think he was a deserter. Now, my next port of call would be exhaust all the different military records. So I point those out in the World War I research guide, but try and find a service record. Try and find a medal card. Now, a lot of these men that were conscientious objectors, they were called up, but they didn't want to bear arms, so they were put into the non-combatant corps, which was those that didn't want to be combatants and bear arms, and they would do pioneering work. They would do labour. stores work. So they weren't actually taking up arms against another person, which they didn't agree with, but they served their country. They served in support work. So you probably will find him in the Labour Corps or maybe in the non-combatant corps, that way. My other port of call would be the absent voters lists. Now, here we have the absent voters list on Forces War Records. We have a selection. We don't have them for every single location or county or city, but we have a decent number. If you've not come across these before, they are very, very useful for researching military family members. Now, you may have seen during your family history, you may have seen an electoral register. The absent voters lists sit within an electoral register. And if we don't have yours on Forces War Records, your county or your city, have a look at your local archive. Contact the archive, say, do you have the absent voters lists for 1918? And I'll tell you why they're useful. In 1918, we had the general election at the end of the year. And for those that were still in uniform and were serving away from their home, they could vote by proxy. But their details had to be taken. And so what we see is a number of men still serving, because bear in mind, it was late 1918. I think it was the end of November or early December. I can't remember. So we're talking like less than a month after the end of the war. And as soon as the war ended on the 11th of November, it wasn't a case of just releasing everyone. You know, people were still in uniform serving. And so what you see is these absent voters lists, which have the address, they have the name, so you can confirm your ancestor that way. But gold dust on the right-hand side, their number, their rank, the unit they served with. And I've had cases of researching over the years where the absent voter list is the only reference I've been able to find, or without it, I wouldn't have been able to research them, because basically they had such a common name. You know, this fella here, Albert Parsons, that would be a very, very hard name to research on its own. And then you find them in the absent voters list, and it's just that nugget of information that sets you on your way. So have a look at the absent voters list as well, Claire, because that might help you. I'd search for newspapers for the First World War as well to see if he comes up in any newspapers. It may be trickier after the war because he would have changed his name, but definitely have a look at newspapers too. And that's a really good question. Thank you for that one there. And let us know how you get on as well. It's always interesting to hear how you get on afterwards as well. Okay. We have a few more of the pre-submitted questions, and then one more, and then I'll get on to some of the live questions as well. Excuse me. Okay, here's one from Phil. So Phil, I don't have another sip of water. My word, it's warm, isn't it? I hope everyone's coping okay with the heat, because it's so warm. But let's get on with Phil's brilliant. Oh, and I do apologise. Sorry, Phil. Let me go back to Claire. I've just bear with, humour me here. One more record. For those that were conscientious objectors in the First World War who didn't want to serve, a number of them did actually join the Friends Ambulance Unit. This was a voluntary ambulance unit set up by the Quakers for those that wanted to serve but didn't want to bear arms. Now, the Friends Ambulance Unit, they used to, on their website, have all these cards available to look at digitally. I think they're in their archive, but here's an example on a blog they've written. And I've looked at these cards before, and they are really, really interesting. So here's one for a Lionel Penrose. Often contain a photograph, but what we can see here is a lot of basic information. So I'm not saying definitely, Claire, that he would have joined the Friends Ambulance Unit, but if you are joining someone who was researching someone who was a conscientious objector, or who didn't serve for one reason or another, you may find them in this collection. I've used it a little bit in the past, and it's a really, really good collection. Okay, apologies. Let's jump back into Phil's question here. Okay, my grandfather, Frank Oakley of the Machine Gun Corps, was killed at Locre, Belgium on the 2nd of August 1917, by mustard gas. So during the Third Battle of Ypres, the Passchendaele Offensive, he was awarded the Military Medal for Gallantry, but I can't find anything official to say what it was for and why he went from a private to Lance Corporal again. There's no paperwork available. Where can I find some information? Okay, so the challenge we have here is that we've touched on this earlier with John's question, that the military medal is very, very difficult to research. So we've grasped that already, that it's very, very difficult to research. Now, in this instance, you mentioned that you can't find any paperwork about his promotions. His service record could have been destroyed. If you look at my guide to researching First World War family members, Phil, you may find some references and some clues in there to help you find the records. But a service record, First World War British Army service records, about 60% were destroyed or badly damaged during the Blitz in September 1940. And that puts us at a disadvantage because a lot of our ancestors, our family members, British Army service records were from the First World War were destroyed. But there are other records that can help fill in the gaps. But even a service record probably wouldn't tell you when the action that he was ordered the MM for. So I've just searched for his surname and number. For anyone researching family members, whether you're on Forces War Records or Ancestry, I often just search for surname and number. And you can see at the top here, I've searched Forces War Records Oakley 3422 because Phil very kindly provided the number. And there's a number of records here, Phil. We've got a pension ledger index card. I can already see a number of entries there. That'll be for his children, his dependents when he very sadly died, the money that was paid to them. An entry in the soldiers' effects records. We're going to have a look at that in one moment. And his medal card and some references to him being in the military medal, being awarded the military medal. Now, as I've mentioned already, you can search for the military medal here. So this we're on the London Gazette website, Oakley 3422. I can see here because I always search surname and number. I find that an easy way of doing it for me personally. Okay, I can see in the London Gazette here. And let's follow the principle I showed you earlier. If we delete this part and we get the entire Gazette, let's find our man Oakley. Here he is, 3422. And as we've seen before, huge number of names as we scroll up through the list. But as we see from this one here in August 1917, let me zoom in for everyone at home just so we can see this together. His Majesty the King has been graciously pleased to award the military medal for bravery in the field. So again, just like in John's case, we're getting nothing else. So that's when we need to turn our attention to newspapers, Phil. Search his local paper. You can do that on newspapers.com. That has many, many British papers, but your local archive may have some papers as well. That's probably going to be your best way, in addition to following some of the steps that I've showed you here by searching by surname and number on Forces War Records, and you'll see a number of other First World War records here. You mentioned that why did he suddenly went from private to lance corporal? Again, no paperwork. Well, he could have been promoted. I mean, promotions happened when someone showed that they were capable. If there was a vacancy following, casualties, someone wounded or killed. So he evidently proved himself to be capable of being a lance corporal, and that's why he was promoted. But of course, his service record is going to hold that information. But the one thing I would point out is, I mentioned the soldiers' effects records. For anyone researching a First World War casualty, have a look at the soldiers' effects records. Now, I've linked to the collection in the comments. It's at the one of the very, very early posts in my May checklist. Here we see a number of soldiers who died all on the same page. Now, effects makes it sound like they're personal effects, but it's actually not. It's the money, their pay, and the war gratuity that was owed to them following their death. Now, these originals were held at the National Army Museum, and when I was working at the National Army Museum before I was at Ancestry coincidentally were digitizing them, and we used to have to originally use the original records, and they were really difficult to search through and very delicate, and now having them digitized is fantastic because they're so easy to search. So what we see here is the name, the unit, we see the date and place of death. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Pay, so in blue is his pay, so that was the money that was owed to him when he died. So I think that's 10 shillings and 11 pence. And the next of kin, so his widow and his sole legatee, Agnes. Now, that is really useful if you're researching someone with a common name and they were killed, and you don't know, you're trying to pin them down into a process of elimination. If you know their next of kin, you can have a look at these records here and you can say, right, I know his widow was named Agnes, his wife was named Agnes, and that helps me pin them down. The information in the red is the war gratuity. So he was paid a war gratuity of sadly, his next of kin, his widow, of £13 and 10 shillings. These gratuities were based on rank and length of service, and they were paid after the war. So those are the two things there. Now, to go back to why this collection is so useful, is again, I've said this once before, but again, these are one of my favorite records. They're very poignant and very moving, but they're one of my favorites because the information that they unlock. He was with the Machine Gun Corps, the 58th Company. Now, that's really useful. That information might not appear on any other record. And if you haven't got a service record, you now know that he was with the 58th Company. You can research their war diary. it might help you track down, the war diary could mention those that were awarded the military medal. And so that could be another point to reference, Phil. But now here it is, and I see this sometimes. The 2nd of August 1917, when he sadly died, he died at number 57 FA, France. That is field ambulance. Now, sometimes the location of death is recorded like we see here. Not always. We can see this soldier up here killed on the start of the Passchendaele offensive on the 31st of July in action, France or Belgium. But we can see here that he died. So evidently, as you mentioned, the family law goes that he was wounded by mustard gas. He was evidently wounded and taken to a field ambulance. Now, when you're doing your research, Phil, try and find at the National Archives the war diary for number 57 field ambulance. It won't name the casualties that were brought in, because as you can imagine, they were seeing hundreds of casualties as the days went on. But it will give you context. It will give you what was happening, the number of people that were admitted, the work they were doing. It's just that little bit of extra context that might help. Okay, that's the last one. Oh, there's one more I was going to just touch on in a moment. But these are brilliant. I mean, the questions have been fantastic, as always. Always keeping me on my toes. And yeah, we kind of jumped around the First and Second World War. We haven't really had huge number pre-First World War, but I remembered one that came in, and I'm just going to touch on that now. So let's go back to this start page. In the comments, because this caught my attention earlier, and I'm just going to see if I can find it still. There was one here, I believe. Let's have a look. Apologies, let me call this one up. I'm trying to think who it was now. Was it Claire? No, it wasn't Claire. It was Sarah. Okay. Sarah is researching her ancestor, John Thompson, who served with the 20th Regiment of Light Dragoons in 1813. So we're talking during the Napoleonic Wars. A really, really interesting period to research. Now, I've written a guide on how to research pre-Victorian era military ancestors. So if you are interested in researching family that served in the Victorian era, or if they served during the pre-Victorian era, my guide might help you. It has hints and tips. Let me see if I can call it up here. Let's just see if we can have a look. Maybe I can call it up here. Let's have a look together. So here's my guide, how to find pre-Victorian British military ancestors. And it talks you through how to do it, because it is tricky. There aren't the same number of records available, but you might just come across, a British Army service record or these discharge papers. So it's really worth bearing that in mind. One of the key things are service records, and we have them in this collection here. So I would search for him in there. Now, not every soldier has a service record for the Victorian era or before. These service records were standardized, I think, in 1883. Before then, you tend to find service records just for those that were pensioned, the 21 years of service. Worth having a look. But let's just see. I'll just search for my name just to give you an example. They are amazing records. Let's just see. Will I be able to find one from this early period? I can usually tell by eye. Here we go. Right, just to share with you, because as family history fans, we always love to see these amazing records. Wow, this is an old one. This is, and I mean, you get a real sense of history, don't you, when we look at these? I mean, I certainly do. I think they're amazing records, really, really special. This is for, well, it's even really hard to read. I mean, put on the spot here, but what you have here is an amazing amount of information. You have a physical description. You have someone here that served in 1809. So we are looking at a similar period in the Hereford Militia. So you won't just have militia in this series. You'll have, British Army, full British Army regiments as well. But the point I'm making is this give you an insight into your family member's service. And I mean, what an amazing document to look at. I mean, they're really, really special. So yes, hopefully for yourself, Sarah, these records will help, and my guide will kind of work through what you need and what to look at and what's available. A tricky period to research, but very rewarding if you do find something. Okay, let's have a look at some of the live questions. We've got a few minutes left, so let's have a look at some of the live questions. I'll just join up here. And if I don't get around to your question, I apologize, but hopefully some of the questions that we've answered today will be similar or very relevant to your own research. And there's always next month as well. Let's have a look. Well, Gary, you point out a good point. You make a very good point, Gary, that you are a subscriber to Forces War Records. How do I know for certain if the hint I'm looking at is for someone that I'm researching and is for the same person. So Gary touches on an interesting point there. And this is quite relevant when you're using Ancestry as well. If you pull up a record on Ancestry, let me try and give you a live example. Let's have a look here. Let's have a look. Let's go to this one here. Right. If we go back to when we were looking at Glenn's question early on, do you remember I looked at the 1939 register? Say you're doing this at home. You're in my seat now. You're doing your own family history. You find this record and you think, okay, here's my family member. On the right-hand side, Ancestry recommends records. And it says, okay, we think that these records on the right-hand side are your family member based on the information in this record here. Now, they are very accurate, but sometimes they can be wrong. They can relate to someone completely different. And as Gary points out, how do I know? Well, that's the challenge really of military family history. When you sometimes look at a record, you may look at it and it may not have an address. So if we go back to the medal cards we were looking at earlier, we can see this medal card has an address. That's really helpful. But sometimes we might look at a record that doesn't have an address, like this index here for the RAF. This only has a number and a name. So how would I know this George William Haslam is the right person? And you have to do a process of elimination. Having the number can help. I sometimes, when I'm searching Forces War Records or Ancestry, I sometimes just search with the number, to be honest with you. I'm not saying that will definitely bring something up. It might only bring up the record we were looking at. It might also bring up other records with that number, but that's one way of doing it. But it is a process of elimination. You need to find records that have identifiers. So a next of kin, an address, a date of birth, an occupation, the kind of information that's going to help you confirm that that's the person, that's your person. And then, if it has an address and their army number and you're like, right, that's my person, you can then go back to records like the one we were looking at, the index of airmen, and you can say, okay, I know that number is for my man. That's the record's relevant. It is tough, Gary, but you make a very, very good. It's a very good point. A very good point. It can be tricky, but yeah, that's kind of how I do it, really. Okay, here's one from Lynn. My great uncle William Joseph Taylor was awarded the Belgian Croix de Guerre at Passchendaele in 1917. How can I find out what he did to merit this? So this was a French and Belgian the Croix de Guerre, a gallantry award from the First World War and the Second World War as well, but it could be awarded to other Allied personnel. As far as I'm aware, we don't on Ancestry and Forces War Records have the Croix de Guerre database, if you like. Now, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I think there are some records in France or Belgium that might list recipients in their native language. But if it was me, I would search the newspaper. I would be searching for William Joseph Taylor. So let's do a live example here. So let's go on to newspapers. If this was me, I would be going, okay, how would I start this out? I would go William Joseph Taylor, and let's spell it properly because I've made a mistake there. And you're going to want to do variations of this, Lynn. William Taylor's going to bring up a lot. 1917. And we're looking British papers. Now this, I get the impression, is going to bring up quite a few examples. So what you may need to do, oh my word, really? 22,000? Oh, that's because I've missed out the first speech mark. I was going to say that's going to be a long, long bit of work there. Not 22,000, just one example. So one example, and it doesn't look like that's for us. That looks like it's a quart thing, but you need to look through each one and assess them. So I would then go to William J. Taylor. Now you'll know where your great uncle was from, so look out for references in his local paper. I mean, sometimes I'd even search for like Taylor and Croix for the Croix de Guerre, but again, this could bring up a lot of entries, maybe even throw his number in there. So that's how I would do it. I don't think for the First World War there's a list at the National Archives. It could be worth looking, but I would also just search Forces War Records, see what comes up when you search Forces War Records as well, if you know his number. But that's how I would do it. Newspapers, and then hit Forces War Records and see if anything jumps out. But I do think it's going to be papers that you find that are going to be your main source there, Lynn. Okay, let's have a look at another live question that's come in. Let's have a look. What can we see here? Let's have a look here. Yes, Joyce, are there records of civil defence workers? And yes, there are. That's a brilliant question. There are a number of records for civil defence workers. And if this is a phrase you've not come across before, this refers to volunteers who served during the Second World War on the home front. Now, I actually wrote a guide on this. I don't think I linked to it earlier, but what we may want to do is I can drop it in now. If you are researching the Blitz, I wrote a guide earlier this month. Oh no, back in yeah, early this month for the anniversary of the end of the Blitz, the 85 years, on how to research your family that served during the Blitz. Let me drop this into the comments for everyone watching because I think it's worth mentioning. It is tricky. You can find records of civil defence workers and on the Blitz, but it is tricky. But let me just drop that in. You know, when you're doing it live and you're trying to look at the screen and speak at the same time. Here we go. Let me pop this in here for everyone. If you are researching the Blitz and civil defence work, Blitz, I'm just going to drop that in as Blitz. There we go, everyone. Okay, sorry, I rambled to get there, but we got there in the end. My blog on the Blitz will list how to research family members that experienced it. So not just those that that's those like my grandmother who grew up in Southampton like I did, and their house was hit during the Blitz. And they moved out to the countryside. They were really near the docks. I show you look out for memorabilia, but how to research family members. But then I also touch on civil defence workers. And to get back to, and I do apologise, I've forgotten who. I think was it Joyce? I apologise. I think I've forgotten who asked the next question, but as I got carried away. Joyce, yes, that's right. Civil defence workers. These could be air raid wardens, they could be ambulance drivers, stretcher bearers, fire watchers. So many of our family members ended up serving in these roles. And in the 1939 register, you can all that we touched on earlier, you can see examples of people on the very far right hand side. You can see examples, and in the blog I've put a little snippet here, but you can see on the very far right hand side it has air raid warden or auxiliary fire service. So have a look at the 39 register to see if your family member volunteered. But in terms of civil defence records, there are service records available, but they're not in one neat archive. They tend to be in local or county archives. So I would have a look in your local or county archive. Ancestry has digitized a small number of them, and we can see here there's some here for Aberdeen. It has some for Berkshire and for Aberdeenshire. So there are a few different collections there. So if you can't find them in these specific Ancestry collections, you may find them in your local archives. So it is possible. And have a look in newspapers as well, because sometimes papers will report on individuals serving. I think I put an article in this blog about a list of air raid wardens just before the war, just on the declaration of war. So that's worth having a look at too. Very, very interesting. It's great to try and get to grips with the experience of our family members that served during the Blitz, not just those that were in uniform, but those like my grandmother who was evacuated, or my great grandmother who were moved because their house was damaged. So it's worth their stories are so relevant and so important, and hopefully this guide can just help you learn a little bit more about what they did and experienced. Okay, we're almost at time there. Wow, it's been a very warm one. I hope you're all doing well and coping okay with the heat. And thank you so much. I mean, I know it's tricky at the moment being so warm in summertime. I do appreciate you giving up your lunch hour and your lunch time and a part of your day to join us on this Q&A. As I mentioned before, this is the highlight of my month. I love doing it. I love helping you with your family research. It means a lot to me, and I think it's so important that we keep these stories of our military family members alive. I hope I've given you some good tips to go away with. If I haven't answered your question, there's always next month, but hopefully some of the questions I've touched on today will help you with your research too. You're welcome to ask another question in the next month, usually the last Thursday of the month. We have got the SOM anniversary coming up very soon. We're doing a lot of work on that. Let us know if your family members served on the SOM. We're always interested to hear. But if we don't speak before, have a lovely June. Stay cool, enjoy the summer. Good luck with your research. Hopefully you make some interesting discoveries and you can share them with us next time or drop them in on our Facebook page. And yeah, thanks for joining. Thanks for watching back afterwards. Take care, everyone, and we'll do this all again next month. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.